Hello everyone, welcome to our program Meet the Musicians. I'm your host Terry Kelly, and today we're talking with Konstantin Feinhaus. We're talking about the piano concert that he's going to be offering on April 7th at the Lawrence Public Library. This is very exciting. It's a new concert series. Welcome, Konstantin.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're going to be playing. You've played at the Lawrence Library before.
That's correct.
On the beautiful Steinway.
That's also
1914.
correct. Yes, I still remember that action and the warm sound of the older Steinway.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sound, and I'm sure you noticed the keys were a little bit shorter.
That's correct.
Yeah, they had to cut them in order to save the ivory keys, which we don't get any longer.
Yes, I remember that.
But the piano is beautiful, and it's sitting there in the auditorium just waiting for someone to come and play it. So on April 7th, you'll be playing, and the concert is sponsored by the White Fund, which is a local fund, and it's for the arts and enlightenment of the people of the Merrimack Valley.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's,
Yeah.
The last time I played the concert, was that about 4 or 5 years ago?
That was 2015.
Okay, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Great.
And I remember the date, and it was in September.
Okay, but you have better memory than I do.
Maybe, I don't know. You remember an awful lot of music.
Yeah, but not other things, perhaps.
Well, my husband used to say that my head was so full of notes that there was no room for anything else. So
Yeah, I think for me it's sometimes there's not even room for extra notes.
I want to ask you something. What is your favorite piece of music to play? Like if you were just sitting down at the piano and you were practicing for something just for pleasure, and you had 20 extra minutes, what would you play?
I think it's hard to name one, but there are a couple that I think I always resort to when I just come and maybe encounter a new piano that I want to try, or perhaps I'm in a concert hall playing a chamber music concert, but I want to sit down and play just a little bit of solo just to try out how that feels.
Yeah.
And though two pieces would be Schumann's Fantasy in C major, and the other one would probably be Chopin's Polonais Fantasy. And both of those pieces I've been playing on and off for more than a decade now, and I know that I always come back to these pieces. I never quite tire of them.
Yeah.
And I think invariably when you live with a couple of pieces, essentially, for a decade, invariably, when you just sit down at the piano, those are the ones that kind of tend to flow out of you, as it were.
Yeah. If I have 2 or 3 extra minutes, I always play Traumerei. I just never
Of course.
I never get tired of it. And that chord at the end.
Right.
That is the most beautiful thing. What could be more beautiful than that? And I have some students who are working on it, and they love it. Everyone who tries it just loves it. And there are certain pieces of music like that that you just fall in love with.
Right.
They can be short or they can be long. I had one student who was working on the Moonlight, the Moonlight Sonata, Beethoven, the Pathétique, and he said, "This is discouraging, it makes me mad." I said, "Well, why don't you think about how many people you know who can sit down and play it?"
Right.
And he stopped. He said, "Oh, 2. I said, "Who?" He said, "You and one of the other students." I said, "Well, there are other people." He said, "Yeah, but I don't know them personally." He said, "So I can only name 2. I said, "There aren't many people on this planet who can just sit down and play that from memory."
Right.
So I guess he realized that it was quite wonderful thing to be able to do, and
Right.
practice like crazy.
Right. So his feelings about it must have changed a bit after that.
Yeah, a lot.
Of course.
A lot.
Yeah.
So now where were you born? I already know, but
I was born in St. Petersburg, Russia. Well, for me it was the Soviet Union at that time, and that was in 1978. And we came to the U.S. right after the fall of the Soviet Union in '91, right at that cusp when communism was falling in all over Eastern Europe, but of course in Russia as well. So it's been quite a while here as well. Talking like 28 years now.
28 years.
That's right.
Do you miss Russia?
You know, it's hard to know. I would say that Russia is my homeland, but this is my home. Or Russia is my fatherland, but this is my home. So it's hard to know. There are certain sentiments associated with childhood, and of course, certain sentiments associated with childhood in a certain place. Those sentiments cannot be replicated just because you move to a different place and you're already older, so you don't have those early impressions of things.
Yeah.
So I think there's a part of me that's very tethered to that kind of sentimental world. But altogether, this is really my home.
Yeah. Well, I'm awfully glad that you came here.
Well, it's been wonderful.
So, how do you spend your days? Well, let's go back first. When you started piano, how old were you and who was teaching you?
So I wasn't one of these prodigies who started at the age of
I know.
5. I started, I think, at 6.5 or 7.
Yeah, and you were a little bit resistant, I think.
I was maybe a little resistant, and also I wasn't in one of those music schools where everybody is dedicated to practicing many hours a day. It was actually at my regular school that there was a teacher who was giving classes as part of an after-school program. So this is where I started.
Yeah, imagine.
One of my memories from that time was that this teacher, who I recall was a very good pianist, I always remember that she always tried to, between the lessons, to grab at least a couple or minutes to play on her own, maybe just to erase the memory of all the bad playing that her students were doing. So,
and maybe to inspire you.
Maybe, but all I know is that when I was coming in for my lesson, the door was closed and she was playing there, and I would knock, and then she would stop and open the door.
How did you feel when you heard her play?
I think I didn't feel like that was going to be anything that I could ever do at that point. Obviously, when you're a kid and you hear someone play really fast and very beautifully, you think, okay, this is not a kind of place where I will ever find myself.
You were so wrong.
I was a little wrong.
You were very wrong.
Maybe a little wrong.
Oh my goodness. So after that, what happened?
So after that, I applied to what was, at least statistically speaking, the best music school in St. Petersburg, and I was in 5th grade at that point. And I came to audition there, and I played something, and then they tested my hearing, if I'm able to, not my hearing as I can hear, but can I hear notes, can I hear intervals?
Yeah.
And the verdict at that time was, well, you're clearly very talented, you can hear very well, you can discern intervals, you can discern chords, but your piano playing is at about 3rd grade level, and I was going into 5th grade. So they offered to take me on to study choral conducting. Obviously that wasn't, they saw perfect fit, a person
with the
who's
hearing and
maybe not instrumentally very strong, but able to discern certain musical elements, and they thought choral conducting was going to be a perfect fit. Obviously, didn't go for that, and so then I auditioned to a second best music school in St. Petersburg, and they put me on a waiting list.
The nerve.
Well, that was my level at that time. They probably were correct. Luckily for me, I got off the waiting list and actually got into the music school. So the following year, when I was in my 5th grade, I went to that school, and I think I was there for 3 years before we came to the U.S.
So, you know what I love best about your story? That a person can take an after-school little class like that and start out being not a wunderkind.
That's correct.
And look at what happened. You're a world-famous pianist now.
Well, I'm
And
not
that
sure
was-
about the world, but I do what I'm supposed to be doing
Yeah.
most of the time.
Very well, too. But just think of your humble beginning, and you're so humble talking about it. You never brag about anything. But to think of that this might happen to someone else, just taking a little piano class here and there, an after-school class just for a few minutes, or listening to someone play and be inspired, and thinking, I'll never be able to do that, but I'm going to try. You never
right.
know how someone will react.
Right, that's absolutely correct. I do remember pretty clearly that by the time I was in 3rd, 4th grade, when most of the kids were playing soccer outside, I was sitting at the piano and I was playing for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So there was some sort of, I guess, predisposition, let's call it.
Let's call it you're a musical genius.
Well, like proclivity. But yes, so I think there was, even at that time, there was a certain temperamental qualities or maybe certain affinities that, kept me in the chair practicing rather than, being outside playing around with kids.
Yeah. And it stuck with you. You never ever wanted to give it up? Was there ever a time when you thought, oh, I shouldn't be doing this? Or did you always just love it and stick with it?
I would say that any and all considerations or flights of fancy into considering a different, let's call it, career path were purely theoretical. So there were other things that I liked, more specifically foreign languages. I was pretty good at them at school. I took advanced classes. And it wasn't difficult for me to do well, which is very flattering, obviously. So, yes, I did consider other paths, but again, those considerations were kind of more on a theoretical level, as in, would I be able to do it if I didn't do music? But at the end of the day, I never really genuinely considered moving past just the kind of ruminations about that.
Yeah, and you just always stuck with piano.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah,
I would
and
say.
I'm so glad that you did. But did you always love classical music, or was it like one piece of music at a time, or did you just want to play all of it, all the repertoire? How did you feel about it all?
I think I had always liked classical music for a certain period of time. Until pretty late in life, I would say, maybe into my early 20s, I really was not open to any other kinds of music at all. So it was only in my early 20s, mostly through influences of my good friends who thought, I should be a little more enlightened, a little more open to other things. I started listening to jazz and even some pop music, and not too much. I don't want to exaggerate my position here. But classical musical, I always loved it. I listened to a lot of it. I don't feel the need to necessarily play all the pieces that I love. So certain pieces that I love,
you just want to listen to them but not play them?
Yes,
Oh, that's
I would say
interesting.
it's like some things that are beautiful, you see that they're beautiful and you want to own them.
Yeah.
And some things you're just fine looking at them and maybe even using them, but not necessarily owning them. I know for me it's like that with pianos. I never wanted to own a wonderful piano. I like playing a wonderful piano. I like looking at a wonderful piano, but I never wanted to have one. However, like a car, a cool car, I always wanted to own that. As well as use it, as well as look at it.
What kind of piano do you have?
So I have a couple of pianos. We brought a piano called symbolically Red October back from Russia, and was not a very good piano, but it was my mom's piano when she was growing up, and so we brought that over. It's now standing at one of my students' houses, former students' houses.
Oh.
And then I have one more upright that's found at a different student's house, and then I have a 1942 Baldwin grand that I really like. It's still from the Ohio factory from the old days.
Yeah,
and
well made.
Well made. The sound is very good, but even that piano is not at my house. It's at my friend's recording studio, and so I play on it once in a while. But most of the practicing that I do is usually at Boston University or New England Conservatory. Not a big fan of practicing at home.
Yeah. Oh, so you teach grown-ups.
I teach some grown-ups. I teach some kids.
Yeah. Can you tell a little bit to our audience about what's the difference between teaching kids and teaching grown-ups? Like some grown-ups have a master's degree in music and you would still be teaching them. Why does someone with a master's degree in music still need music lessons, piano lessons? People don't seem to understand that. They think you learn to play the piano, and once you can play, and you're done. Could you talk a little bit about that, like continuing teaching?
Yeah, I think a lot, of course, depends on what level you have attained during your early years. But even probably more importantly, it matters a lot how you led your life from, say, the age of your early mid-20s into whatever age you are now.
Yeah.
So if you have persisted or persevered or chose to keep it up, you're going to be in a certain level, and then you'll probably need instruction that's less, let's call it, intrusive or invasive. But of course, if you had practiced a lot and even attained a pretty high level, but then dropped it and did something else for a couple of decades, you definitely need a teacher to bring you back into that realm of music.
I talk to so many people who say, I took piano lessons as a kid and then I gave it up, and I would give anything to be able to go back to it, but I'm too old. And of course that's not right.
I always feel that people tend to undermine themselves and underestimate their abilities, and obviously it often happens to very bright and very intelligent people who are perhaps, more realistic and less delusional about things. But that sentiment very easily crosses into a kind of a defeatist, self-defeatist attitude. And so I think almost the kind of the brighter, more intelligent, more perceptive people are almost more prone to be discouraged just because perhaps their vision of reality is hopefully or perhaps a little more clear. But then it's also, I think it taints their efforts. So I find that the more perceptive or the more let's say precocious the person, the more work you need to do with them to convince them that you have to be idealistic again, being very, very much down to earth realistic is good as long as there's a tinge of poetry and a tinge of idealism. But I think just being too pragmatic about it will almost drag you down a little bit.
Yeah. People should not be afraid to try. There are some people who will never play well, and there are people who will be able to play really, really well, but they don't realize it. And sometimes the experience as a child, if they had a bad teacher or they didn't want to practice or something, they see it as something negative and they're afraid to go back and try it. But there's so much to be learned and so much to be gained from going back to it. And you do what you can. Not everyone's going to be Konstantin Feinhaus, but if you enjoy what you're doing and you love the music, I think it's wonderful when grown-ups go back to it.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I have an example of a student of mine, a wonderful person, and she's also become a close friend. She is almost 90 right now.
Oh.
So she had attended Juilliard Prep when she was a kid, and all the way through high school, but then did not go into music professionally. She went to study philosophy of education and was teaching in that field, and in fact still publishes books. So I've known her for 11 years, and she's on her 4th book, I think.
Wow,
But
at her age, that's
at her
remarkable.
age, that's very remarkable. But that aside, she had, however, played the piano continuously, and so even at this advanced age, she plays very well. She plays very difficult pieces, Beethoven sonatas, Schumann Humoresque.
Wow.
She played Bach Goldberg variations a couple of years ago.
Oh, my.
And obviously some of the physical facility is slightly diminished,
Yeah.
but she can still tackle these huge pieces.
That is amazing.
And then I have so that's one path, and then I have a different student who is younger, but also, let's say, pretty advanced age, and she had only started playing the piano 5 years ago, and
As a beginner?
As a beginner, and of course it's a different path. It's somewhat more of an uphill battle because you haven't had the childhood experience, but she is very methodical. She still works, but she practices 2-3 hours every day, wakes up early in the morning, and she has made amazing strides. Can play, pieces that she can enjoy, Mozart and this and that. So I think that these two different paths, we're two adults with different paths, but both are doing it in their own way, and both are pretty dedicated to it.
Wow, that is wonderful. Well, you never know what you're going to get out of piano, because when I was little, I was sick all the time, and when the kids were outside playing, I was in playing the piano, and so my life was piano and books, because that was all I could do. But piano was the love of my life. That was all I ever wanted to do.
Right, and it still is.
It still is, yeah. And I can't walk by the piano. I have to walk around it, because if I walk by it, I'll sit down and start playing.
That's great.
So, but it has really saved my life. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have those piano lessons. And I remember when I was in Children's Hospital, and I was crying one day, and the nurse said, "Do you miss your mommy?" I said, "No, I miss my solfeggietto. I was supposed to play it in a recital."
Right.
And she said, "Well, maybe your Nana will cook some for you." She thought it was Italian food.
Right,
And-
that's too funny.
Yeah, so the nurse told my mom, and my mom brought the music to the hospital.
Right.
And I was in bed studying it,
Yeah.
thinking if I can just get out of here and play in the recital, that would be great.
Right.
And they brought a piano in, and they had to take the arms away from the wheelchair so I could play it. And
That's incredible. What a story.
so I played, and I played the solfeggietto in the recital, because I did go home, I did play it, and my teacher said, in front of the whole audience, she said, "You are a sugar cookie." And I didn't know what to say, so I said, "You are a cake." And everyone heard what I said, so it became a joke with everyone, but I always remembered that, the solfeggietto.
Of course.
It was,
Yeah,
it was
that's so moving.
yeah, it was a wonderful thing, and I still have that copy. And I also have the C-sharp minor prelude, Rachmaninoff, which I was practicing and crying because I couldn't reach some of the notes. And my father took it and threw it in the trash barrel. And I had my cousin, Rick, dive into the barrel, and he saved it for me. It's full of coffee grounds, and it's a mess, and I still have it.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I show it to my students and say, take good care of your music.
That's right.
I still have that copy, and I still have music that I had when I was 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah,
Hung
I
on to
keep
it.
a lot of the papers
Yeah.
from the old days from the childhood.
When the editing was just wonderful, right?
That's right.
The editing was a lot better in some ways. Well, I don't think we have much more time, but
I think we've covered everything we could have possibly covered.
I think there's a lot more, but maybe some other time we can talk more. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's always so much fun to talk to you, because you've had so many different experiences, and you play so beautifully.
Well,
It's
thank you
just-
so much.
Just magical to hear you play.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
on April 7th, 2019, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you will be performing at the Lawrence Public Library, and the program is a secret right now.
That's right.
Right, but we'll talk.
We'll figure out what the program
We'll
is.
figure out what that is. And it's something very exciting to look forward to, and it's free. And there's a reception afterwards, so people can actually meet you. I know my sister met you in 2015.
That's correct.
And you were swapping recipes after the
That's
concert.
correct. I remember that very well. Yeah, conversations about music always go very well with conversations about food.
Right. Yeah. So, well, thank you for coming
Thank
today.
you so much. Thank you.
And I'm really looking forward to April 7th.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching our
Thank you.
program, Meet the Musicians. And this is Terry Kelly with Constantine Finehouse saying goodbye for now. До свидания.
Take care.